Face it, there's probably been problems in your life that you're trying to solve, but the thing is, when you're constantly just working and you're focused in the moment, and it just seems like you just can't find the answer for whatever it is that you're trying to solve. Now, what you'll notice is that when you focus more on these problems, they don't tend to get solved. Rather, there's a different approach that you can take, which we'll be discovering in just a moment, about what you can do to more effectively solve the problem rather than forcing a solution in the moment. Now, to set the context straight, there are two different sorts of networks that your brain is engaged in at any given time. The one that we're describing here is when you're focused in deep flow in work. You're in this network called the task positive network. This is when your attention is fully absorbed in the task, whatever you're doing. It has to do with planning. It has to do with keeping your attention, your full focus, everything concentrated on a single task. You can call it the mission control center, which is the task positive network. Whereas the other side, or the other network of your brain, is called the default mode network. This network is activated when you step away from your work, when you detach your work and you're able to go out and reflect, introspect, and kind of like see things from a broad, big picture level. And they work hand in hand because at one state, your brain is in one side of it, whereas at another time or period, your brain state is in the other side. So it's a seesaw effect where one state gets activated, the other one gets deactivated, whereas when the other one gets activated, the other one drops. So it's a balance between going online and offline. Now, as we just said, the task positive network, that is what tends to get activated. Now, when our full conscious mind is fully absorbed and in deep flow and really just working on the task that is at hand, the thing is, we are in a way constrained because the conscious mind can only absorb about 7 units of information at any given moment. Now, when you switch that over to the default mode network, what happens is that you enable the subconscious mind, which can basically take up as much possible RAM of your brain as possible. Even right now, I am focused on the camera. What's happening in the background is that I'm taking up all this information that is going on, and it's being registered into my subconscious mind. So the same thing happens when you step away from your work and you're doing something else, a menial task, walking, maybe even doing some chores. Your brain is still processing events, information, and everything going on in your life, even solving problems. Now, what we're going to discover here is talk about the McDriver method. Now, what the McDriver method is this method to basically fuel your inner genius and also to solve problems. And it's unbelievable how effective it is because it works. It was developed by a man, or it was discovered by a man named Lee Zlotov. And he's the creator of this episodic show called MacGyver. And from MacGyver, this guy would just solve all these different problems. So the way the guy even discovered it was because he had to continuously create new episodes for this show. And he didn't have any times, right? Like any free time. He had these crazy deadlines he had to get into. And because of that, he was forced to solve or just get creative and solve problems. Like, all right, what's the script going to be? What's XYZ going to be, right? So as a result, what he would do is he would get out a piece of pen and paper. He would write down the thing going on in his life, and then he would just step away from the work. And then when he stepped away from the work, maybe for about 1 to 4 hours or even like half a day or so, and then he would come back, he would just force himself to start writing. And then what happens was solutions and answers start to appear. Now, this is basically the MacGyver method. You are in this state where, say, you know you have to do something. You're writing things down. You just want to get it on paper. And then what you do is when you detach yourself from it, like this is why writers, sometimes they don't fully finish the paragraph or page that they're working on. They just leave off at a good spot. And then from that spot, they just allow themselves to come back the next day or like in a few hours so they can just pick up where they go and then kind of just like leave someone on a hook point where it creates this open loop in your mind so your subconscious can still process it. And the same thing is happening here. You're opening this loop where your subconscious mind is still going to be processing the thing you're working on in the meantime. And then by the time you come back in a few hours, even you might get an insight sometime throughout the day. And what happens is when you come back and you just start writing, you just start processing, you start working through the problem. Just solutions start appearing, like you start creating these different insights, different parts of your brain are activating. And what's happening is you are actually producing the answers you need in real time, especially too with the sense of urgency there in the background. You're more prone to enter flow and just utilize this creative ability of your brain to produce and create and just solve the problem at hand. And funny enough, this is something Thomas Edison would use. What he would do to create these inventions was he would just take a nap, and he would have, like, I believe these two balls in his hands. And then he would probably nap for about 15, 20 minutes. And then when the balls dropped out of his hand, I believe that's how the story goes. The balls would just drop out of his hand, and then it would wake him up. And then when he woke up, he would have, I guess you can say, like, these eureka moments, or he would, I don't know what his like true intention was behind it, but from the sound of it, from what I was doing research, it just sounded like when he would wake up, he would have these insightful moments and these periods where he can just incubate the ideas going on in his head during his nap. And then when he'd wake up, he'd have like all these ideas and know how to solve the problems next and stuff like that. So that kind of thing. And then also too, you may connect this to like how Tesla worked, where he would work, or Nikola Tesla, by the way, how he would work these ideas and stuff in his mind. And by doing that, when he'd wake up, he'd basically have all the solutions there. It's because he's like working actively on a problem, and then his subconscious works on it overnight. And then when he wakes up, it's just everything is there, the solutions and everything. So if you want to use this method practically, this is all you have to do. One, first, write down the problem. You should be working on something, and whether it's you're working on something, or you're writing something, or you're creating something, just have something where you can write it down. Ideally, you're doing this on a pen and paper. And the reason is because you activate regions of your brain where it becomes more sticky into your memory, and then it allows your subconscious mind to process it when you go away from the work. So that is one way to start. You want to write it down somewhere, ideally by hand. Next, distract yourself from the problem. Go do something else. Whether it's you're writing this problem and then going to bed and then waking up the next day. This is something Josh Wadzkin talks about, where he would write the problem down overnight. And then when he wakes up, what happens is he just starts journaling. And this guy's like a peak performer. He is I believe, a champion in martial arts, and he was like a chess prodigy. So he also even used this strategy to basically cultivate his inner genius. He would write down the problem overnight before he goes to bed, and then once he wakes up, he would just start journaling to see what the subconscious mind has worked up overnight. But if you're doing this throughout the day, simple. Just stop what you're doing with your work, write something down on a notepad or something like that, and then from there, just take a 1 to 4 hour break, or maybe even a little longer. And then by the time you come back, that's when you're going to be the most ready for actually figuring out some sort of solution for the problem, or whatever creative block you're in, writer's block or some sort of artistic block or work block, it doesn't matter. And then finally, force yourself to free write and doodle. Even if you're like drawing something, or you are just trying to process through everything going on in your life, you have to have a moment where you're coming back to the work. And then when you're in the work, just force yourself to start writing, and then you'll just start picking up steam and momentum. And then from there, you'll start to notice that the answers, the solutions you've been waiting for are all just coming out because your brain was processing this in the meantime. And it's incredible how effective this is, because I can attest to it. It works because I've done this for the longest time, and I never really knew the name of it until I finally discovered that there is actually a name for it. It's called the McGyver effect. And I knew of these different things called like insight time and all these other things, but now there's a actual practical framework you can use to become more creative and solve problems faster. So use this to your advantage if you want to achieve more, if you want to accomplish more, and especially too if you're in some sort of creative block. So other than that, hope this video was insightful. Hope you got a lot of value of it. And I hope to see some good feedback from everyone watching this in terms of how this method is helping for you. I'm curious to know. But other than that, see you in another one. Oh, and by the way, one last final thing. I have just released my newsletter. I've been sending out weekly newsletters on human performance optimization, time management, productivity, preventing burnout, and all things around that. So if you're interested in getting emails sent directly to your inbox every single week, sign up to my newsletter. You won't regret it. That'll be all. See ya.